Hey everybody, it's PartyElite here with the Beginner's Guide to Total War 3 Kingdoms. Today we're taking a look at an extremely powerful tool available to you on the battlefield, Cavalry Charges. While charges are an action that any kind of unit can perform, cavalry charges, when perfected, can be an extremely potent weapon all on their own. A good cavalry charge can turn the tide at crucial locations and ultimately can turn the tide of an entire battle or even a whole war. So, without further ado, let's talk about perfecting cavalry charges. First things first, let's discuss a few hidden elements from where charges get part of their power. This applies to all units. Whether they're on foot or on horseback, every individual entity in a unit has a current speed and mass. When one entity collides into an enemy entity, it applies what's called impact damage. This damage is the result of the speed and mass difference between the two entities. The bigger the difference in speed and mass, the higher the resulting impact damage on the lighter of the two entities. To put it simply, the heavier entity will hurt the lighter entity, and the faster the heavier entity hits the lighter one, the more impact damage it will do. This is why cavalry charges into infantry are more potent than cavalry charges into other cavalry. There is a much greater difference in mass, which results in a greater amount of impact damage. This is also why you want to give your cavalry room to pick up speed before making contact with the enemy, and it also is why a downhill charge will cause more impact damage than an uphill charge, or why charging in a forest is less effective than charging in the open. You want as much speed as possible. Apart from this impact damage, charge bonuses make a very big difference during and shortly after a charge. You can see the charge bonus stat of a unit here, and you'll notice that the charge bonus numbers vary greatly, with Romance mode generals typically having massive charge bonuses, followed by cavalry in either mode, and then by infantry. As small as a charge bonus might be, it still applies benefits to the charging unit. For about 10 to 15 seconds after a charge, the charging unit gains a boost to its damage output, and the amount of extra damage output is directly related to how high this number is. Combine impact damage and charge bonus together, and you can see what the ideal way of targeting charges is. Take the heavier unit with the higher charge bonus and send it charging into the lightest enemy units you can find, standing in an open field. Now, let's discuss some nuance. There are two types of cavalry, generically speaking: melee cavalry and shock cavalry. Both have decent charge bonuses, but shock cavalry will typically sacrifice some melee stats for a larger charge bonus. This means that while both types of cavalry can be used to charge effectively, shock cavalry does a better job of it, though they have very little staying power. They need to be cycled in and out of charges constantly, as they die easily when engaged in melee for a long time. Giving a charge order is as easy as selecting your unit and double right-clicking on the target. Once the order is given, however, it's important to know that the charge does not start immediately. Your unit will first run towards the enemy unit, and when it gets close enough, it will begin charging. You'll notice that when upgrading your generals in campaign games, they will sometimes increase their retinue's run speeds, and at other times, they will increase charge speeds. This is the difference between the two. You'll notice a similar distinction is involved in various cavalry formations. Speed and charge speed change separately, and you should keep in mind that speed refers to the overall speed of the unit, and charge speed only refers to the speed moments before the charge hits. While the former helps get a unit around the battlefield, the latter helps cause more impact damage. This is why wedge and diamond formations should be activated when closer to the enemy. You don't want to slow your cavalry down while they're running into position. That leaves them open to interception and interruptions, but you do want the extra speed and resulting impact damage when the charge hits. Picking charge orders is a little bit more involved. One of the best uses of cavalry is to shut down enemy ranged units. Unfortunately, it's also quite dangerous. Cavalry present a large target for enemy archers to easily hit, and even when in loose formation, cavalry will take a bit of a beating from ranged units. But once the gap is closed, the ranged units don't stand a chance. They are extremely lightweight, they're terrible in melee, and they often have little morale. I try to swarm enemy ranged units as soon as possible with my cavalry, and this gives me a huge advantage for the rest of the battle. Naturally, this excludes ranged units that also carry spears. They need to be charged a bit more carefully, as they can defend themselves against cavalry. Once ranged units are taken care of, or at least once most of them are taken care of, I focus on frontline engagements. The classic hammer and anvil tactic works wonders. The anvil is any unit of yours that can hold an enemy unit in place, and the hammer is any unit of yours that can attack that same enemy unit from behind. In this case, the hammer is your charging cavalry. By the time you're done mopping up enemy ranged units, chances are the front lines have engaged. At this point, you'll want to identify which parts of the front lines need help. You can either provide help where your units are failing in order to turn the tide, or you can provide help where your units are already winning in order to ensure a quicker breakthrough. Focus on flanks to allow your troops to close in from either side of the enemy, focus on the center to allow your troops to break through the middle, or focus wherever help is needed at any given time. With multiple cavalry units, you can focus on multiple spots at the same time, of course. Wherever you choose to go, keep in mind a couple of things. 1. Your units will clump into each other if you tell them to attack the same target. This will slow them down and it will reduce the efficiency of their charges. 2. Attacking a unit from behind and attacking from the side are two different things as far as morale damage is concerned. The former causes more morale damage, but perhaps more importantly, the two can stack. So, if you're going to send multiple cavalry units into one enemy unit, try to bring them in from different angles to maximize morale damage. After the charge hits, let your cavalry stick around for about 10 seconds at most, and then order your cavalry units to pull away and prepare them to go charging into the enemy again. Work up and down the lines, and you'll destroy your enemies in no time. You can also go charging after loose enemy units. By this, I mean enemy units that aren't currently engaged. As I discussed in the first episode of this guide series, charging into spears from behind or the side or while they're running around is a completely viable option as well. But you need to be very careful that they don't turn around and brace for your charges in time, and you need to be extra careful not to stay engaged with them for too long, even if you get a good charge in. Charging into any infantry unit that is running around is a great way to deal damage, and if you can persistently cycle in and out of charges, you can destroy a unit before it even makes it to your front lines. And yes, that's what it's called. Cycle charging is when you dive into a unit, quickly pull back, dive into them again, rinse and repeat, and just absolutely obliterate them. Remember, again, your cavalry is not meant to stay stuck in combat for too long. You need to stay on top of their movements and ensure you keep pulling them out after you've reaped the benefits of a good charge. To pull out after a good charge, you'll want to pay attention to where the separate entities within a cavalry unit have ended up. Sometimes they will crash through the entire enemy unit, and at other times they'll get stuck in the middle of enemy entities. The reason you need to pay attention to this is because you'll want to give the order to pull out in a direction that provides the path of least resistance. And sometimes, yes, that path is straight through the enemy unit. The entities in your unit will try and go in a straight line from where they stand to where you're telling them to go. This means that they can get tangled and stuck in melee. They can get swarmed by enemy units, or they can otherwise find themselves unable to comply. And if enough entities in a unit are unable to remove themselves from a melee engagement, the entire unit turns around and re-engages. Oftentimes, this means giving multiple orders to pull out in different directions, freeing up entities in different directions before giving one final order to head further away as a unified unit. The other option is to use the about face order. While it's not bound to a key by default, it used to be the J key in previous Total War games, and it would tell a unit to go back to where it charged from. This does make it quicker to pull a unit out, but I prefer being able to choose the direction my units fall back to. Just makes it easier to manage, in my opinion, though it does add a touch of micromanagement, of course. Poor disengagements is one of the easiest ways to fail at cavalry charges, not paying attention to where the entities have ended up and then not being able to disengage. The other easy way to fail at charges is to charge headlong into spears or into a turtle formation or a shield wall formation. Honestly, don't do that unless you're trying to disband a unit via suicide. A well-placed charge can completely devastate an enemy unit, and as the physical damage hits a unit, the coinciding morale damage it causes can break a unit with ease. This 1-2 punch can quickly turn any battle in your favor. Remember, supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. Use your cavalry to bring a swift end to your enemy's will to fight. Know when and how to charge, and know when to pull them back so they may charge again. Because that's what being a great general is about. Make sure you subscribe to this channel for more Total War related content, from tutorials to Let's Plays and more. If you have any topics you'd like to see covered or any tips of your own, feel free to add them in the comments below. As always, a massive thanks goes out to all of my channel members and patrons for supporting this channel and keeping it alive and running smoothly, and a big thanks goes out to all of you for watching. Until next time, cheers.